Hello, hello, hello. This is John Kennedy here with Above Board with Candor Path. And I am recording solo today. And that, you know what? It's a tough act to follow because the Rich B did an amazing one last week on good, great, or greater. And I felt the calling or the desire to do a solo one as well. And actually, in fact, let's talk about this. We are going to be introducing or trying to introduce a little bit of a new format, and it's our effort to keep the consistency of our show up. So the format will be we'll have three different sort of sleeves or three different styles of podcast within the Above Board podcast. We'll have shorter monologue version podcasts of Matt, myself, or Rich talking about various topics that are really meaningful to us on our heart at that time and something that we think is useful. We'll have the guest spots that we've really been learning from and enjoying having people on the show. And then we'll have the traditional old school format of all three of us just cutting it up and chatting with each other. But today, I'd like to talk about this concept. Originally, I was going to call the podcast Win or Learn, which is a play on words of win or lose. And the fact that losing is not not necessarily the ultimate option. There's always learning and failure. And instead, we decided to call this one temporary defeat or permanent failure. And that was inspired by this crazy book that I read recently called Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. Now, listen, this thing was written in 1938. So it sounds almost like a polarizing, provocative topic or title for a book now. I can only imagine how that was received back in 1938 when this came out. But in the book, there's a specific thing that he says, and I'll sort of loosely quote it. It's, I have discovered that there comes with every experience of temporary defeat and every failure and every form of adversity the seed of an equivalent benefit. Now, what does that mean? But before I answer that, actually, I'm going to talk about what doesn't that mean. It doesn't mean that you are guaranteed success later as a result of experiencing temporary defeat. It's the seed of a benefit. It's the potential of what you can learn from it. I feel it's up to you in how you view this temporary defeat and your ability to take that and then turn it into something positive. Look, I've not been shy on the podcast to talk about my 75 hard journey. And maybe what I didn't give enough credit and credence to is the amount of times that I failed before I successfully completed 75 hard. And I'm actually, depending on when this podcast airs, I'm probably only a couple of days away from completing the 75-day stint again. But there was a lot of failure within that. And there was a lot of learning and determination and resolve for me to take those failures and say, I'm going to use this constructively, and I'm going to turn this into only a temporary defeat and make it something positive. We really feel like, and this is something we talk a lot about on the show too, that success is built on the shoulder of the previous failures that you've experienced. And I'll call Matt out here. Something that he always talks about is failing forward. So we set these goals and we don't always reach them. And is that an okay thing? In fact, not only is that okay to set goals and not experience winning those goals, it's almost, we almost sort of feel like within our company and some of the personal goals that I know Rich sets and that Matt sets, that if we're hitting all of those, we're probably setting goals that are maybe too easy. We shouldn't be able to reach all those goals. And it's okay to fail because there is learning in that. And something that recently for me is really difficult is being a parent. I have a almost 3.5-year-old and a 6-year-old. And with my oldest specifically, I'm watching her go through experiences where, I want to like come in and fix the problem. Like I want to make it okay, or I want to, do it for her, and fast track her success in it. But I realized through this quote that I read in this book, Outwitting the Devil, that if I do that for her and I make things easier for her, then all that ultimately does is she never gets to experience that temporary defeat. And then in turn, that seed of equivalent benefit of what she could potentially learn from that. And I think anyone listening to this, if you're parents, you certainly know that that's really, really difficult, because there's this push and pull feeling of like, I just want to step in and I just want to help and I just want to make this better. But also recognizing that just like us, our kids have to learn how to deal and cope with temporary defeat if we want them to grow and develop into into what they're capable of being. So I think for me, there's two really specific important takeaways. The first one is you're not alone. There is not a single human on this planet that has not experienced losing, that has not experienced defeat, failure, however you want to name it. But I think it is up to us to determine if we're going to take that, sit in it, and never do anything constructive with it, or if we're going to sit in it, observe and learn from it, and then pick ourselves up and do something productive with that failure. So you're not alone. And number two, I really feel that this is a prerequisite for you to get to where you want to go. You will experience failure. You will feel embarrassed. Of all people, I should know. I experience this often. It doesn't take even just your experience in listening to our podcast. If you go back to the early episodes and the growth and development of how we communicate and how we recorded those podcasts, I mean, there were many failures along the way, even in just something like that. And the feeling of embarrassment of like, does anybody want to hear this? Does anyone even care about what I'd have to say? And the answer is you're going to experience those feelings, but there's a difference between permanent failure and temporary defeat. And through each one of these instances, I personally have learned a better resolve and a new way to package this into something positive. And as Matt would say, it's failing forward. It's setting goals for ourselves and being okay with the reality that we may not actually achieve or accomplish or do that thing that we set out to do. But you know what? We learned something along the way. And I bet you there was a lot more progress by working towards a goal that you maybe failed than if you had not even set that goal out in your distant future. I'd like to end today with a quote by Thomas Edison. And it's, I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. Very simple, very powerful and important. And again, thank you all so much for listening to Above Board with Candor Path. As promised, we're always focused on coming out with new information, new content, and staying committed to producing weekly podcasts for our audience. If at any point you feel inclined to share our show or give us a like or a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you consume podcasts, we would greatly appreciate it. Thanks as always for listening to us, and you have a great day. See ya.